Go live. Okay, looks like it is live. How are you guys doing? How was your week? My week was a lot better. Definitely starting to feel more energy and have less of the symptoms of being sick. And I can't believe how much my mental state and emotional state has improved. And it's almost like it's more than just being sick. It's almost like that was a kind of situational condition that was bringing up these feelings of unworthiness and not being good enough and not deserving. So I did take some days off work, but not that many because I don't have that many sick days. So I was trying to work while still having intense exhaustion. And I really feel for anyone else who is struggling with their health and trying to work. It's very challenging. And I was feeling not good enough and not deserving of my job, which I do consider a blessing. And it doesn't feel very good. And I was also blaming myself. Thinking, maybe I did something wrong, that I'm not recovering fast enough. Like there's various things you can do to try and help yourself get better, vitamin C, zinc. And I wasn't being super consistent about those things. But ultimately, it's not necessarily your fault, the things that are going on. Sometimes these are just things that you're going through, and we've got lots of intense energies right now, and this seems to be something that most people in the spiritual community agree on that is happening right now. So we're going to get started. Today we're talking about what are we leaving behind in the 3D. So this was motivated primarily by the videos I've been watching, but this particular video that I was watching, and it was someone who was channeling a conversation with someone from the future, which initially was interesting, but then they started talking about a bunch of things that I thought, you know what, I don't think I want that in my future, and I don't think that's the timeline that I'm on, so I stopped watching. But then I saw a comment from them later that was explaining, this is a possible potential in the 3D, and so they explained it a bit more, and I thought, oh, okay, now I think we're on the same page. So I went back and made notes on it for this live because I thought this is a really interesting example of timelines. So we've discussed shifting from 3D to 5D before. Now, what's happening within this process? So maybe energetically, some people say we've already moved to 5D, but the body is just catching up, and we are experiencing things in the 3D world, so this is where it's kind of tricky, like it's kind of confusing. We're still experiencing some things that are not part of where we're moving into, but some of these things, they don't have to be permanent. They can be temporary. They can be things that we're working through and moving through. And I tried to explain this better or make sense of it by saying physical manifestations appear after energetic manifestations. So maybe us being in 5D is an energetic manifestation, and the physical manifestations, they are working themselves out. You clear old karma, and the after effects of that clearing may show up in your reality while you're clearing it, or even after you've cleared it. So you clear it, and some things may still show up. There's another idea where you talk about, we exist in these spirals, so we kind of loop back around to the same problem or the same issue or same kind of situation, and we deal with it at a deeper level or with a little bit more refinement, or we apply the new skills that we've learned in the last cycle. The other idea I thought about here is a healing crisis. So this is a term used in homeopathic remedies where you get a temporary worsening of symptoms when you start alternative medicine. Of course, this idea can be misapplied. For example, when I was making my own face creams, and I was using essential oils and getting really excited about it, and I basically kind of burned my face off through repeated use. So for a couple of weeks, I was using these creams that were too highly concentrated for my tolerance, and eventually what showed up were these kind of like blisters. And I looked online, and this kind of reaction was suggested, and me not really applying a lot of common sense. I was in my early 20s. Those kind of things happen. I just continued to keep applying it instead of stopping and just letting that kind of happen. It was just too much. And I got sensitized from the essential oils, and I really couldn't use them at all after that. And it took me a while before I actually went to the doctor, and it was almost like, you've got lava that cools. It was like that on my face. And I couldn't sleep. It was so painful. And I went to the doctor, I got a cream, and they're like, well, you learned, right? I was embarrassed about that. So I didn't apply this idea correctly. But it is a valid idea. So it's also called homeopathic aggravation, a detox reaction or cleansing reaction. Of course, you need wisdom to apply this in the right context. So we'll come back to this later and look at this idea. Okay, so another interesting idea that we want to apply in this discussion is this idea of the timeline cake. So we're thinking about like 3D being the bottom layer of the cake, 5D being the top layer of the cake, something like that. And then the middle being somewhat in between. And then each layer has multiple timelines of its own. So you can see the link in the description. I also included the link in the description for a reference explaining the healing crisis in the description as well. So you've got timelines like the layers of a cake or the pages of a book. So in the lowest timelines, it's mostly a state of victimhood, blaming, being stuck in constructs. They did it to me. And this is really important. Believing the systems in place are not changing. And this belief is really important because it affects what you experience. And, these people, they're stuck repeating the same negative cycles over and over again in relationships. They have a new partner and it's the same old story, or in jobs. I was afraid of this happening with me. Like when I got a job, I was like, I don't want the same patterns to show up for me that have shown up for me in the past. I want to be really careful that it's a really healthy workplace. Lots of people are very familiar with unhealthy and toxic workplaces. They're not fun to be in and very stressful. So I was like, I want to be careful about where I apply, and do something that is going to really benefit me in the long run. Be choosy. And I did. I got a great workplace that was very healthy for me and allowed me the space to heal. So I was still triggered, but I was able to look at the situation around me and say, you know what, I'm triggered, I can work through this, I'm not actually threatened in this situation. I'm gonna be okay. I don't need to start talking to HR about what's going on, or start trying to talk to other people to get them to try and change. So what happens here is you recreate the same patterns that you believe and buy into. So there is this level of belief that, you know, I don't think I can change this because it's external. It's an external focus instead of an internal focus. So in the middle timelines or parallels, so timeline or parallel is used interchangeably in this context. When we say parallel, that's referring to time collapsing. And if time collapses, then, you know, these timelines are happening simultaneously. But that's like we're experiencing a timeline in a linear fashion. So, you know, if you're in an upper timeline, you typically won't come into contact with people in the middle timeline super often, but you might. If, you know, someone in the middle timeline is like feeling really good and they're in a really good space, you might come in contact. So I thought that was kind of interesting. You know, it's really, they're talking about consciousness being like a determining factor in who you're interacting with and what needs to be worked out. Hi, Kate. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Yeah, it's so exciting to have you here. Let me know what you think about the topic. So within this middle timeline, we've got this awareness that systems are faulty and, you know, this desire to start to say no to things that aren't good for you and exercising your sovereignty. So like people have been starting to do that, starting to say no to situations that aren't good for them. You know, lots of people, they're resisting this working in the office and having like an hour or more, 2-hour commute to the office. Then their job basically takes up their life. So they're embracing like this remote work that is more flexible and allows people to have a better work-life balance. So at this level, you're starting to develop your connection with yourself. So in this video, she talks about how on the higher timelines or parallels, there's an awareness that, you know, there's these systems that are fake, that are kind of playing out this play. This aligns with kind of this idea that we are in a play, or there's this matrix that we're living in. So for me, of course, this is a matter of perspective, because, you know, as your consciousness shifts, and depending on what state you're in, you know, this is going to make more sense or less sense. So, you know, the middle is kind of like middle of the road, where sometimes in victimhood, sometimes exercising your power, but there's this awareness that you can create a better life for yourself. And, you know, you might take a bit longer within ascension, but, you know, this timeline is just on the cusp of awakening. Otherwise, when we talk about the lower timeline, that's the splitting of the 3D Earth from the 5D Earth. I'm not familiar with this topic, just learning from you now. Well, awesome. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with, you know, different aspects that I'm talking about here. So there's definitely probably some things that will be familiar to you. Okay, so on the upper timelines and parallels, so there's an awareness of things that are happening, and there's a perception of those being a movie or a matrix. So it's like, okay, I'm the creator of my reality, and I decide what I want to create. So, and there is seeing, these things that are happening in the movie that aren't nice, aren't pleasant, as opportunities that people can take to detach from the 3D. So here's the element of choice. And they see this, okay, these are providing choices for ascension. Why is this happening? Okay, it's to provide this contrast, this negative contrast in people's lives so they can detach, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I want to create a new reality. And together, if we all decide that together, we all create this new reality together. So there is this orientation where there's this inward focus, there's this connection to the higher self, where you're being led through your internal intuition. You're making decisions from your heart, and you're allowing other people to make choices that you don't agree with. You're letting go of controlling really your own life and your own situation. And you're shielding yourself from the influences and behaviors of other people that you see. You see that, oh, it's not such a great influence on my life. I don't like it. I don't want to be around it. And you're setting those boundaries. You know what you want in your life, and you're creating it. So, there is this recognition to create space for yourself where you're comfortable and you're not having your energy drained from people who are draining that energy. Now, do you have to cut yourself off from everyone around you? You don't. Sometimes it can be simpler, where you train yourself not to get emotionally engaged when people do things that trigger you, or that upset you, or frustrate you. You recognize this is what it is, and I'm moving on from it, because we get wrapped up in these kind of things, and we don't need to. I have people in my life who energetically I've cut them off, and they don't bother me anymore. An example of this was within my YouTube channel. There was this dynamic that I had to sort out near the beginning, and there was like some comments that I felt really, really uncomfortable with. I blocked that person, and I never dealt with that since then. And so it's so interesting because, you deal with it, and it doesn't bother you if you disengage from it. Sometimes it'll come back around, but that's okay. You get better every time. Okay, so, and there's a focus on developing self-nurturing connections. So if you are detaching from the things that are draining your energy, then you have energy for self-nurturing connections, for developing your gifts. So, this, at the highest timelines, people are having fun. And when issues come up, they're handling those issues with ease and grace. Because, there's this recognition that anything externally that causes you pain, it can be a reflection of things that are being healed within you. Like, it's this mirror. And it can be like this healing crisis that we talked about earlier. So there's a focus, an internal locus of control, where you realize, I can solve these things internally before focusing on the external. Because sometimes there's both. And, if things are coming up, you're like, oh my gosh, this is showing up again. Like, why? There can be this excitement about, this is evidence that internal healing is taking place and I'm moving up to a higher level. So it can be a really positive thing. Of course, last week, and the previous live stream to that, we talked about the narcissistic family dynamic and this tendency to take responsibility for things that are not your responsibility. So, of course, there needs to be a recognition as well that there are things that are out of your control. So sometimes it's good to take on the paradigm, you know what, I can control so much about my life. And sometimes it's good to let go of that responsibility. Okay, so that was a bit of background information. So here is the video that I talked about that triggered the idea for this live. And so I called it the 3D Earth we are leaving behind. So what I describe here is my understanding of the intent of what she was trying to convey through this channeling. I will say that maybe I didn't fully understand it correctly, so you know, there is some room that I could be wrong about some things. But this is how I understand it. So I will read a quote from one of her posts in the community part of her page that she posted after she did this channeling, which put this into context for me. What I've learned about 3D is that it will always exist. We're not leaving people behind. Some wish to stay there, some enjoy it. So consider this person who she channeled, the PhD history professor. He loves it. So what she's inferring here, I believe, is that the description that is being, this image of this reality that's being portrayed in this video is of 3D. So some wish to transcend it, but some people love the 3D. Either way, we can't make 3D magically go away as long as people have free will and a drive to want that. So that's why I say the 3D Earth we are leaving behind, because I'm understanding this as, you know, this is the Earth that we're splitting off from. Okay, so she is channeling, but what it's not like channeling someone who's no longer here, but it is where she's stepping into this timeline, and I believe that she is having a physical presence in this timeline, so that's what bilocation, I think, means. What I understand it to mean from this context is that she's physically here and also physically there talking to this PhD history professor in the year 2033. So she said it starts as remote viewing and turns into bilocation. So really interesting application of gifts. Okay, so what happens on this timeline? So when I first started watching this, I didn't have that context that this was a 3D timeline. And I was like, what is this? Like, why is this happening? There is a civil uprising, not surprising. Another corrupt election. So why is this? I was like, why is this happening in 2033? I thought we're going to be over this by now. And they said a change from a two-party system to a three-party system as one of the measures to reduce the effects of the corrupt political system, and this triggered a change around the world. So this person is in the US, and so here they're referring to the US. Russia is still trying to conquer the world and being somewhat successful at it. And I was like, yeah, when I heard that, I was like, not on my timeline. I was like, I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to connect to this. So I stopped watching. But when I understood this in context, I thought, okay, this is kind of interesting. So they say Russia was initially aligned with China, but then once Russia started invading, trying to take China over, then they stopped Russia. Then China stopped Russia. And people thought, you know, the Russian leader was a genius until he came for their country, and then they saw, you know, the evil there, which was that's interesting. So maybe if you're closer to what's going on, you can have different perspectives. The perspectives that I come into contact with don't hold this view. So for me, this was surprising to hear this, but. And then they said South Africa has another corrupt leader. Oh. What? And South Africa not being a safe political climate. Yeah. I mean, yes, this is frustrating to hear because. But why? Why? If you have the option for ascension, like why would you choose not to follow that? Because we collectively agree on what reality that we're experiencing collectively. And so that's, we refer back to the splitting of the earth, the 3D and the 5D earth, and that's why it's necessary. Because some people, they want to stay there, the rest don't. Europe had a housing collapse or crisis in 2030 to 2031, but is doing better in 2033. And he said the S&P 500 was 6 times higher at that point in 2033, and there's a flourishing economy, but there was a complete collapse prior, and they worked very hard to improve it. So basically, they're talking about all the projections, all the negative projections happening and playing out. So I believe we're talking about a lower timeline here. Like that would be consistent. If we're talking about 3D, and before, in the earlier slides, we talked about the lower timeline being, that 3D Earth that is being split off from, then I believe that's what's going on. So you might have heard about this, idea that, there's going to be a digital currency rollout that is controlled by the central government. And he's saying it was rejected. So that's a positive thing. They talked about the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency. And, maybe at that point, part of the world, not the whole world, had some financial wins, but there continued to be environmental issues like intense ice melting, not to mention, loss of species. So this is so interesting because, if we're talking about 3D, you've got elements that are happening, but they're happening on a slower timeline than what I was expecting. Hi, Stephen. I'm doing a lot better than last week. Thank you for joining. So the light technology discoveries, which were used as a health technology, were discovered in the tomb of a pharaoh. So this is something that I would expect to happen, but probably on a sooner timeline. So what I mean by that is like on the timeline that I expect to be on, I would expect that to happen sooner. Discovery and manufacture of biodegradable plastics, finally. And also the development of plasma energy sources for electricity, air conditioning, and water purification. So apparently this makes homes more affordable. Where I live, the major expense of homes is not electricity, but maybe, maybe on that point in the timeline we're talking about, the air and water purification might be prohibitively expensive because of the environmental damage. So I guess it depends on the context. There's also tons of weather disturbances due to incremental pole shifts, which results in natural disasters. So another thing that you could expect is Social Security crashing and recovering and then crashing. But he said there was other systems in place. So this history professor said there were other systems in place for elder care. People banded together to find solutions. And there was a lot of work done to regenerate finances and the fertility of the land. So it was possible, but there's a lot of work to do. There were cures for cancer and leukemia. So, I mean, here's another aspect of belief systems. Like, it's important, your belief systems are important. Like, is it possible that we could cure leukemia and cancer? Yeah, of course. And people are coming together for what matters when faced with natural disasters. So people are banding together. Oh, okay. So apparently this timeline did not avoid World War III. And there were problems with the air quality due to the devastation. And to deal with that, they wore masks and stayed inside for a really long time. That's, oh man, that's brutal. So we're not moving towards that, for sure. Corrupt political systems were no longer in control because people were taking a stand against them. And interestingly enough, ETs landed near the US White House. Now, we're expecting likely ET contact much sooner. I'm expecting. I'm not too worried about it, you know, when and how it happens. But it's interesting, right? And they're described as tall. They had suits with an upside down triangle on the right underneath their shoulder blade. So if someone wants to comment about, you know, the symbolism there, that's why I included it. And they had big foreheads and beautiful blue-green eyes, and they communicated telepathically. So didn't use like verbal language, but communicated like within, I guess, the mind. And people on location where they showed up received an instantaneous healings. So following that, people would communicate telepathically. The people who were able to communicate telepathically would request healings, and the ETs would show up and provide those healings. And only the people who had that telepathic communication would know those designated spots where if you showed up, you would receive a healing. So that's likely a benefit of being able to communicate telepathically, a reason to start working on being able to communicate with your higher self and develop those kind of skills. You've heard of this before, the upside down triangle. Enlighten us, Paul. So I was thinking about this today, about our gifts. It's very likely that if you're not aware of your gifts, you're likely already practicing those gifts at maybe a very small level, like at a level you're not aware of. So you have the seed of potential, and that's exhibited in some way. Yeah, the telepathy and the ESP. It turns out it's a valuable gift. So, you know, and it's a lot of developing your gifts is developing awareness that you have it. So practicing it and realizing that whatever is showing up for you, like, yeah, that's the gift, and not getting discouraged with your progress. Because, you know, some of these gifts are very subtle. they're not super obvious. So we've talked about, you know, developing gifts in previous lives where, especially like the claircognizant gift, it's not obvious. So part of developing your gift is just developing that awareness that, oh yeah, that's what's happening. In the later slides, I incorporated, you know, some of my own tune-ins with what's happening energetically, and I tend to gravitate towards using tarot because I've practiced it for a while, so it's very comfortable, it's very easy, and it's really natural for me to connect to it, and I don't experience a lot of self-doubt about what's happening. And so you've got like generic meanings for the cards that show up, and I look at the card and I think, okay, so I know the generic meaning, like what does this mean? And what happened for me as I was doing this process is that I would get like a sentence that would show up in my mind as to what that card meant. So that is an example of claircognizance. So it's almost like, you know, there's this idea that was received, and because I was using a medium that is comfortable for me, I was able to drop the resistance that I would normally have that would prevent me from acknowledging that as what is happening. Hi, Luminal Mind. Thank you for joining us from Missouri. Energy is a triangle. Understanding natural law depends upon a new teaching concerning the geometry of energy. Using pure math misses the pattern. Very interesting stuff. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Paul says they always describe communication between aliens, but we have the abilities within development. Yeah. So I was practicing this today. I went skiing, and on the way home, driving down the mountain, I was thinking about this. Okay, after I did the slides for this presentation, I thought, okay, I should practice this. And I was just starting this dialogue within my mind. So I would like start saying like hello. So I was, what live was it that I talked about connecting with a spirit guide? Might have been the first one of 2024. I don't remember exactly, but I connected with a spirit guide, and the name that I got was Melchizedek. And of course, you know, that can refer to an energy. You know, it's not necessarily like a single person, and it's like, oh, if lots of us are talking to like the same guide or the same energy, it's not as if they can only talk to one person at a time. So I had already established that connection before, so that was a connection that I was familiar with. So I opened up that conversation and I started asking some questions, and how I experienced it was basically I ask a question and then I kind of get that response, and it has a certain, you know, sound, like tone of voice and certain personality, and I got nervous and then I cut it off. So, and like that's the element that is, you know, it's very subtle, right? Because on one level you're just talking to yourself, on another level you're developing a spiritual gift. But, you know, maybe in developing this spiritual gift you start with talking to yourself. You have to practice letting down that resistance. Okay, so that's the end of the slides that I had for that video. And I've got the link in the description. You can go and watch it yourself. It's quite a long channel. And what I have here is my energetic tune-ins, and I'm going to include the cards or the decks that I used for reference. So in the past couple weeks while I was sick, like I felt really down. I felt really depressed. I felt like my life has no purpose. I felt like a failure and my life lacked meaning. Like it was really, really rough. And I also felt like I was responsible for like that current state that I was in because of my inadequacy. So I called this dealing with temporary darkness. And of course at the time it doesn't feel temporary, but part of me did remember, you know what, I didn't feel like this a couple weeks ago. Okay, so the answer or context in regards to this situation was, you are experiencing something your soul signed up for long before your time on earth. Find peace with where you are rather than trying to create a different outcome or taking responsibility or blaming yourself for what you're experiencing. This is a process of washing away the old, so go with the flow. So this was really relieving for me to hear. And I used the Season of the Witch Symbolic Oracle cards by Lorraine Anderson and Juliet Diaz. Okay, so I asked what positive changes are happening. So this is a temporary period of great changes and shifts where there's radical changes in the energy field, and we're splitting off of lower timelines. So there's an intense purging of old energy. Life is ready to birth. There is an ascent out of the darkness, which you're experiencing, kind of like coming out of a cave into the sun. And this is the end of a chapter in your life. You're reaching for the light, and you're going to experience that surge of hope soon. So I did this last weekend. And I'm feeling better now. I understand exactly what you're describing. Totally feeling the turbulence of emotion, feeling rudderless despite superhuman efforts to normalize and maintain equilibrium. Thank you so much for sharing, Luminal Mind. And that's, I feel that describes it really well. I was experiencing it, you're experiencing it. Very likely that, more people are experiencing it together. And if we don't talk about it, like, we can kind of feel like we're drifting alone by ourselves when we're really all moving through this together. So what can you focus on? You can focus on your desires and creating the visions you desire. Take action towards a fulfilling life. At the time, I was not in this state of mind at all, but that's okay. I was like, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna accept it. I'm not gonna get upset. I was almost in this state where it's like, would feel upset by this, but I recognize, you know what, I don't have to put pressure on myself to do this right now. I'm probably gonna feel better soon. Beautifully said, Luminal Mind. Yes, absolutely. And I included a picture. This reminds me of a bit of Norway. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but it's in the mountains, it's in nature, it's beautiful. Looks like a really nice vacation spot. Okay, so what are you being invited into? You're being invited to help birth a new destiny for the earth. So when I was doing this, I was primarily doing this for myself, but looking at the themes that showed up, I thought, you know what, this is not just a message for me. So I was included the things here that I thought, this is something that we're collectively going through. And does explain like some of what we're experiencing and feeling. So great power and blessings will come your way. Ooh, exciting. You have unlimited spiritual resources. I was like, oh, really? Then why am I feeling like this? Because you need to learn how to use them. You are on target when you are in alignment with your heart and soul. So you generally you're on target here. And you know, this is a space where it's like it's both really tricky, but there's also a lot of potential. And it's like this space where desires and intentions meet materiality, the material world. So like where things are manifesting. And this is a chance for you to rekindle your passion and creative energy. So for this, I used the Mystical Shaman Oracle by Alberto Villaldo and Colette Baron-Reid. So for this slide and the following slides, I used the Energy Oracle cards by Sandra Ann Taylor and the Super Lunaris Tarot by Jacob Schaefer and Jess Schuler. So, like, one of the things that I've wanted is a romantic partner. Some of you watching, you also want a romantic partner as well. And for you, like, this could apply whether you're in a partnership or not, but if you feel like the door to romance has been closed, some of the reasons might be you are becoming your own source of love, and you are releasing old patterns that are in the way of deep trust, bonding, unity, and balanced give and take. The template for love is changing, and you are part of that change. So, and there's another aspect to that, is that I've seen someone else mention this as well in CCC readings. I will try to remember to link them below as well, where they described, you know, having a partner who, instead of feeling like another person, another separate being, they kind of feel very similar to you. Kind of feels like being with yourself. So there's the similarity in soul, or someone in your soul group. So, you know, things are changing rapidly, and it's not just like a superficial change. It's like energetically changing like the entire system. We have been doing that together, energetically changing, you know, these paradigms and belief structures, and doing massive amounts of healing, somewhat conscious, somewhat unconscious. And this is part of like what the role that we're playing here. Massive action in alignment with values. Yeah. I say doobie doobie doo. Yeah. Doobie doobie doo. That I laugh at that because it reminds me of teaching piano and trying to teach students how to swing. Doobie 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 doo. 2 pillars of manifestation. Most people skip the action and fail to embody the beingness required for real and lasting change. I've made the mistake of not taking proper action. Yeah. And, you know, even, like, is it a mistake? Do we have to see it as a mistake? Or is it learning? Something that we're learning. Like, we're learning how to combine the energetic changes with the action. I'm learning piano right now. Oh, that's so exciting, Luminal Mind. How are you enjoying it? So whatever is going on for you romantically, you know, remember that so much is changing, and you can let it just grow and develop into something really, really beautiful. This is something that I've struggled with that has seemed like an obstacle for me. So we all have the different things that we struggle with. And this is showing up for me a lot lately, where I've had a lot of anxiety about, being with a partner or being in a marriage and feeling stuck, where I feel like I'm taking a lot of the burden of the work, of the physical or emotional or other kinds of labor, and it's not balanced, it's not reciprocated, because that's what I grew up seeing with my family and with my parents. And so there's this underlying fear, like, of getting into that situation and experiencing that again, because I experienced it as being a child within that dynamic, and it affected me a lot in a negative way. And so I really don't want to, I have this fear around repeating that pattern. So this shows up in the cycles of thought that I think about, that I journal about. So this is not for everyone. Like, people are experiencing different things. But that's just an example of what I'm experiencing. You're loving it. Awesome. Yeah, I think learning piano or, learning new skills should be something that you really love and enjoy. Okay. So a theme that came up was stepping into your power, in the sense of dismantling a system of oppression to create new systems. Okay, so when we talk about feeling disconnected, so I asked, what blessing is there despite feeling disconnected? Okay, so what blessings can show up? Developing a fiery appreciation of life. Now, I was emerging out of the darkness and still not feeling awesome, so I was like, okay, I'm open. I'm open to hearing this. Also, being clear about what kind of relationships you want rather than accepting existing templates or assumptions. And, the people or partner that you're building with is slowly coming. So whether that's like a romantic partner or, people in your life who, maybe you're already building with. Some of the work that you're doing, Kate, in Paradise, like, you are working with and connecting with people where you're building partnerships, and you're just doing really beautiful, beautiful work that is helping people, like, through the process that we've been talking about in this video. 100%, a dismantling process is well underway. Yeah. I mean, it's been happening for a while, really. Yeah, so sometimes, what can happen is really, like, you've got a lot of momentum and you're, like, sizzling, but, there might be other people who are coming, and they're just taking a bit longer, to get to where you're at. So another question I asked, what is emerging from within? An opening of the heart, new emotional beginnings that are healing and nourishing, discovering truths about yourself, walking away from outside influences to follow the light of your own lantern. And so we're doing this at deeper and deeper levels. Considering what is true, or like being a disciple of truth. So, and this is something we're really going to be faced with, and I find myself laying in bed at night wondering what's true. Oh, during the past couple of weeks where I went through this dark period, I was questioning everything I've been talking about on this YouTube channel. I was like, is that true? And I was doubting it. And I was like, ah, maybe it's like all crazy. Which is weird because, you know, I've been on board with it for a while, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. And it's so interesting to feel within yourself like that shift in perspective. While I was sick, I was listening to someone else. I don't remember their name right now. They were talking about like what's happening right now, and they're saying, you know, there's like these pills of consciousness that basically give us this perception where consciousness is located in the brain. Those are being kind of dissolved, and once those are dissolved, then we're going to lose that restriction in consciousness and basically, I guess, become enlightened or awakened. I resonated a lot with that. And she said that during this process, you're going to have a lot of like pain in the head, headaches. And I was like, well, is it that, or do I just have sinus congestion? But I'm still experiencing the headaches, even though I don't think I have a lot of congestion. So it's like, well, is that true, or am I just sick? I don't know. But it was really interesting to listen to that. I will try to remember to link that as well. Okay, so inner voice healing. So something that came up was healing in the 5th chakra, like the voice. And something that came up was that creative expression is blocked when your limiting beliefs block you from speaking or manifesting what you want. And this was specifically referring to the inner voice or your self-talk. I was like, oh, so when we talked about developing your spiritual gifts, one of the tools to develop the third eye was the sleeping mask, which I've really been enjoying for like relaxing. I haven't been practicing the clairvoyance very much lately, but when you block off like the physical sight, it activates the spiritual sight. Maybe that's not the right way of saying it. And I thought, oh, in this case, like, you take away physical speech, it's almost the same idea of like activating the speech that is internal. That's kind of like what you hear in your head. I don't know if that makes sense. But like, I only thought about like the 5th chakra being related to like physical speech. I didn't think about it in terms of, well, we were talking about like how ETs communicate telepathically, so is that not like a higher expression of the 5th chakra? Yeah, so this is the end of an old phase, the beginning of a new phase, where you're closing a spiritual lesson. If I think about, not as much when I started this channel, but I started another channel, Pamela Earthling. So it's my tarot channel, which I haven't worked on much. But when I started learning how to make videos on that channel, and the degree and level of negative self-talk that I experienced trying to make videos was so intense, and it's just like I couldn't turn it off. So I've come a long ways since then. No doubt you have too. But like, how much, like that inner voice that's really negative, how much it can like poison the well makes a huge amount of difference. Like learning how to deal with that inner critic and turn it around so it's not just like emotionally dumping on you all the time, basically. That's huge. Okay. storm brewing. The idea of a storm brewing, I was like, okay, expected. As an energetic theme, I was like, okay, what kind of storm is brewing? So it was this idea of conflict where it looks like people are winning who shouldn't be. But what I got from this was, whoever's behind the scenes of the movie are in control. So and it's only a temporary appearance. So we talked about this level of awareness in the higher layers of the cake, so the upper layer of the cake or the upper peril. And taking things less seriously when you decide, what, I don't want this to be part of my reality. So when things happen, we tend to get stressed out, right? That's natural. And think, oh, I gotta do something about this, what do I do to fix this? But part of what's unfolding is really sweeping away the old dust, the old dirt, the old cobwebs to allow your destiny to unfold. And the message here was, your destiny is only hidden in the shadows for a bit longer. You're going to realize, and it's going to become obvious, all the work that you've done, everything you've done up to this point, all the challenges that you've overcome in your life, all your skills and abilities, your value and your worth and your power. If you've been struggling with, feeling that darkness over the past couple of weeks, or, you can think about a past experience, you can see how much your perception can be distorted, how much you can be blinded to, what's true. And it's on some level you can know it's true, but your experience, it can be really difficult, right? So, and that's not something you have conscious control over, right? You are pretty much riding the waves. Okay, so when asking about the role of love in this process, and I was using the Whispers of Love Oracle here by Angela Hartfield and with illustrations by Josephine Wall, so she's a very well-known artist. Very beautiful, detailed illustrations. So you have many miracles happening in your life right now. Good news. So if you have a negative situation, instead of retelling the story, because that's not going to heal it, surround that situation with love. So I've been struggling with this. I have, a situation that I've been retelling a negative story about. So this applies to me, but if you have, a storm come up, instead of retelling the situation, you can acknowledge it, but also surround it of love, because when you choose love, negative feelings have no place in your heart. I find, these messages challenging because they really challenge you to step in to your higher self, which has a very different perspective. It's scary stepping out of your comfort zone, but that's where all the action is. The universe can flow and move you freely. Thanks, Paul. I spend a lot of time erasing narratives. Ooh. And changing my memories on past events. Cognitive distortions are awfully convincing. I know, they're so convincing. Yeah, thank you, Lumina Mind. That's a great practice. Yeah, creating new narratives. And, if you're going to be scripting, I think one of the things about scripting is, if you're, writing out a script and you're playing it back to yourself or rewriting it out, is just reminding yourself like, oh yeah, this is what I'm holding on to. This is what I'm accepting into my life. Because you forget. I forget. Okay, so fear came up as a theme here. The cognitive reframing. That's a powerful technique. Thanks, Paul. If you've been feeling darkness, you've been releasing fear and all its associated energy, right? So this is part of light work, releasing fear. And you are like that vessel or that channel. So associated energy of fear, worry, anxiety, like it can be like having like a pessimistic outlook and, you know, like saying, oh, this is going to happen. But it's basically all the energy that is added onto any kind of situation where it's like, it can be trying to avoid something happening where, you know, fear is a protective coping mechanism. And it can be just basically like adding a bunch of extra emotion to the situation. I know I can think of things in the past, or times in the past, where I got really upset and added a lot of emotion to it. One of the things was a couple of years ago, there were a lot of fires, and the fires got really close to our house, and someone was telling me that I needed to like get up every couple hours during the night and hose down the conifer trees because they're particularly flammable. The conifer trees and then like parts of the house. And I was super anxious and upset. And then like that person kind of got everyone else riled up about it. And then they went to bed. Right? So I was like, oh, okay. So then I got all upset and riled up about it, and in the end, nothing happened. This was crazy. Like the sky was orange. It was so intense. I mean, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is serious, but then there was all this energy added to the situation. So we're so used to using, you know, these protective coping mechanisms, which are rooted in fear. And, you know, part of releasing fear is being able to realize that, you know, there is true protection in vulnerability. You break through that barrier of fear and you discover this freedom in being able to really truly be yourself and be vulnerable and show up in a really authentic way. And like when I started this channel, like those are some of the videos that I was talking about, and you know, people were really resonating with, because vulnerability in practice really was revolutionary at the time I was making those videos. So, you know, and I listened to some videos this week where someone was talking about kind of creating this like image in their mind of a safe, protected space where they imagine they put their inner child there, like a meadow or like a really protected like house or home, and just creating this safe space for their inner child. So there's a possibility of kind of desensitizing your nervous system and bringing down that stimulation and letting yourself feel safe, where you're not just pressuring yourself to just be on guard all the time. And that's courage. It takes courage to be able to release those ideas about like, no, I need to worry about this, and I need to like be upset about it, because if I'm not upset about it, I won't do anything about it, and then I'll get hurt, and this whole story. Be cautious but not fearful. Yeah, good advice. A simple distinction that can make a big difference. Fear is a rational fantasy about something that isn't even real. Yeah. Caution is informed based on relevant data sets. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Luminal Mind. That's really interesting, because we can even take those relevant data sets and then create fear from that. And that takes a lot of wisdom and self-awareness. But if you're aware, you can tell, right? You can feel that within yourself, like, you know what, do I want to be feeling this fear, and is it helping me? Because sometimes feeling like an issue is pressing does help you. Okay, I need to take some action. But sometimes there's nothing you can do about that. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the slides. So here I use the Oracle of the Seven Energies by Colette Baron Reid. Really beautiful images. I enjoy this deck. Okay, you're getting a burst of magic and a sudden higher knowing that everything has a purpose. So in the past week, this has gotten so much better for me. And I think it's going to continue getting better. We're going to gain more and more awareness of this. And even having like this kind of dip in energy can also help as a reminder. Is things are changing and shifting rapidly, and you're going to sometimes experience that. We are cultivating consciousness, cultivating conscious contact with a higher power. So, whether that means with your higher self, or developing that telepathic ability and being able to connect with ETs, healing resentments, releasing pain, cutting ties to a destructive story. So this is so powerful, and this was so helpful for me to hear, because I can see how that pain within me is being released, past pain that is driving some of this anxiety and worry and fear. Connecting to true desires, because when you let go of this fear, you're no longer in protection mode, and you can actually live in your desire. Imagine it, right? Because you're not trying to play defense. And focusing on abundance and gratitude. We know the benefit of that. Okay, so what about the payoff here, right? Because, it's helpful to know there's a reward at the end of all of this. We've got our dreams emerging from the cosmic ocean to be realized. So we've got the symbol that's used, or the story that's used in Genesis, where creation began in the darkness. So, there may be dreams or things that you have desired or wanted that you've forgotten about. And they are coming from the cosmic ocean, or the realm of the unconscious, into your reality. The wisdom in your heart is being refined into ultimate wisdom. And I can't say how valuable this heart wisdom is, because it's the difference between almost like someone who has like that life-giving energy versus someone who is really like aimless and is almost kind of like dying from the inside. So this wisdom, it's being forged in the fire of your heart. It's like how increased pressure purifies and strengthens. So we have the image of it like a diamond that we're familiar with. And here I used the Healing Waters Oracle by Rebecca Campbell. So that's where the connection for like the cosmic ocean reference comes from. Happy full moon. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, thank you, Luminal Mind. They said it's a great slide. Okay, so that is the end of the slides. And we managed to get through them fairly quickly. So thank you everyone for joining, and everyone who is watching later. And thank you, for all the work that you're doing personally. Because you're showing up, you're able to be an encouragement, to me and the other people here. And, it makes a difference. Often, within my personal daily life, I sometimes feel like, I don't want to make videos, I don't really want to do the live, but I actually do it and get on the live, and then later I'm like, oh, I enjoyed that, like that was fun. And I enjoyed the live today, especially. Yeah, thank you. Awesome job. So, and it's that accountability where, you're showing up here for me, so I want to show up here for you too. So there's some pressure, but that pressure, it's leading me into, what I'm passionate about. And you need a bit of that pressure, right? Because you need to take that initiative. Like Luminal Mind, you're learning piano. So you need a little bit of pressure to endure the parts of learning piano that aren't as fun. I know, like, sometimes it can be not as fun. There can be a little bit of that monotonous aspect. Like you're doing the same kind of thing over and over, and you are developing the wiring between your brain and your muscle. Your brain knows what to do, but your muscle is trying to like figure out how to do it. Like there is that level of, kind of, okay, I have to fit like this into my life, and like how do I make this work so I can really ignite my passion on this thing and do it consistently, despite like the various things that are going on in your life and you have to deal with. But there's a payoff. You're building a beautiful life for yourself, and all the work that you've done in developing your consciousness, you are creating a reality and a space for yourself that's a beautiful place to inhabit. Great presentation. I have a lot of resistance putting new content out there, so you are leading by example. Thank you. Luminal Mind, you would make amazing and incredible content. Like, we can tell already from what you're sharing here, like you have such great things to share and such great ideas, and you're very articulate. So what I've learned is it doesn't have to be as complicated as you think it needs to be. So right now I'm using a mic from Amazon that was $25. So, and you can just plug it into your phone. So right now I'm using a laptop, and I just plugged it into a laptop, so my setup for the live is a little bit complicated because I'm using OBS streaming software and then also using Zoom, and then I've also got the Google Slides that I've got together. But like, I learned how to use OBS when I was making the tarot videos, but it's something where you could just like use a very inexpensive mic to talk on your phone. And I've seen channels where they just have their audio of them talking, and then they have the like the thumbnail black background, white text, and they don't even add captions. They just have the same thumbnail for the whole video. So, and they have lots of people watching. So, and of course, you know, it takes time for people to actually start watching, and but I totally understand that resistance. Like it can be really intense because it's you're anxious about what people will say, and it's like your inner critic comes out, and it's just but I do think it's worthwhile. Unity is awesome, along with staying unique and rare and being comfortable by yourself. Yeah. Love the encouragement. Working on what will be my 100th centennial upload. But I keep dragging my heels. Oh, Liminal Mind, is that, you mean that's your 100th? You've already made videos? If so, I'll have to take a look. Paul says, when we come together like this, we are tuning into the same frequency and exchanging energy. Absolutely. So cool. It's good energy. Yeah. I love it, and I appreciate it. And you know, I love the energy that you're bringing here to this live. Awesome. So I've got some ideas about next week, and of course every week I'm wondering like, hey, what am I gonna do? I don't know. But you know, there's always ideas that show up. So yeah, we'll see what happens next week. And so have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.